I'm Jack Bowmaster and you're watching UteFans.net.
Hey, Ute fans, welcome to another great episode of The Extra Point, presented by UteFans.net. So, Cal and I were talking about the Freedom Bowl a minute ago. That was a great game. Mark, we talk about the Sugar Bowl from time to time. That was a great game. What we saw last night was not a great game. Very disappointing. The offense just sputtered. Defense held them to 13 points. You think that would be enough, but it wasn't. And we just couldn't get it done. And our offense, as Mark had mentioned before we started, was pretty fragile. And TCU capitalized on that. It's funny to think that before the season started, we were favorites to win the Big 12. And I'll admit, I bought into the hype. I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got Dorian Singer and, Cam Rising is going to be back and he's going to be full strength. And we got Mekhi Bernard running the ball and all these other players and with a lot of talent and depth. And you'd think that would be enough. But we've had some bad luck. So, Cal, what do you think happened last night against TCU? Our second home loss in a row. First time that's happened since 2017.
We haven't lost 3 games back to back, 2 at home back to back since 2017. It's been a long time since we've suffered this sting. I think what happened last night is the same thing that's happened the last 2 weeks. We faced another team that had a bye week prior to us, and we got out schemed. Especially on the defense. Mark, you mentioned it when you first logged on. They sent the dogs after our offense. Obviously seeing in film the last couple of weeks that we cannot handle the all-out or the delayed blitz. They had blitzers from the safety position 10, 15 yards deep that was not getting picked up. And all they're betting on is one person's going to make a mental mistake in the brain surgery, which is offensive execution, and the whole play breaks down. And they were guaranteed to get their yards. They're at high flash. I mentioned that last week. They were going to test us on third down. We did hold our own on third down defensively, but we couldn't get the stops when we needed, and we couldn't get a first down. 9 possessions and 9 punts. We could not even get in field goal range. I don't even call that a stall in the effort. I think that that's having a hard time getting the engine to turn over.
Mark, what do you think about this game?
Game. To echo what Cal said, I completely agree. This is a team that was teeing off on our offense. They knew freshman quarterback that's struggling to deal with that kind of pressure. Lots of delayed blitzes. I thought Mekhi Bernard did a fantastic job picking up a guy in those delayed blitzes. But I also saw there were enough sacks on the offense that the receivers started after they'd run their route and there was no ball coming, nobody was trying to get open, on a breakdown play. It was difficult to watch all the way around on the offensive side.
It was a flip experience watching the DBs and the wide receivers. Our DBs couldn't close the gap and get in the hip of their wide receivers, which was really surprising to me how it stayed prominent throughout the night. And our wide receivers couldn't get separation. It seemed like every ball that was thrown to them, if it wasn't a comeback and thrown in the basket, they had to fight for it. And I'm not saying that we aren't prepared for 50-50 balls or jump balls, but they knew what they were doing, sending that delayed pressure.
Exactly.
I mean, it's funny because I'm actually looking at the article from the Tribune covering the game, and it's one of the shorter articles I've seen them write in a while on a Utes game. There's not a lot to talk about. TCU was just better than us. The question is, and I hate to put it this way, but how bad are we?
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, we're not close to, what was prognosticated at the beginning of the year. I think that was prognosticated on, a healthy Cam Rising coming back and the offense kind of picking up from where we had left off before that Rose Bowl. So we're struggling obviously. It looks like the offense is like a second or third week in camp kind of development to me. And other teams, they want to win. It's blood in the water and they're gonna go after it. This is big boy ball, and you have to expect that that's gonna come. We're struggling defensively. We're better than on offense. Last week the special teams player was Cole, who kicked 4 field goals. This week it's Jack Bomeister, who, man, if that guy deserves at least 3 massages. He punted so much, it was crazy.
And that was no doubt a roughing the kicker. It wasn't running into. It was a textbook roughing. The referees didn't help out on some key crucial plays. You could see Whittingham losing his cool. I'm not going to use the word bad because that buys into the potential trap word, which I've said for 3 years on this podcast. I hate the word potential. It's a trigger word to get people to buy in and feel this emotional letdown or the angst of staying undefeated. If we were undefeated at this point, people would be worrying about the next game being a trap game, the next game being a trap game. I think the essence of the issue is we don't have an identity. We don't know what we're going to do on offense. I think that the players kind of are aloof in the sense that they don't know what is capable in the playbook. And it's almost like the play calls don't know what is possible in the playbook. All last night's play calling seemed like probe plays. Let's see how this works. Let's see how this works. This will set this up. And that's a great scheme when you have an efficient and executing offense. But we were just struggling to find anything that worked. I mentioned last week the delayed blocks to the second level, maintaining your first chip block on the offensive line. We still had backside outs, inside linebackers shooting through the gaps, and D tackles who are double teamed initially, making the play in the backfield. And Keithy gets the direct snap. You know what the play is. We have just become that predictable with 2 weeks of preparation for the last 3 teams. We can't cram it down people's throats and dare them to stop us like we have in previous years. We've got to find an identity. Defense, Mark, you mentioned it perfectly. They played great. I don't expect them to play flawlessly, but for how much they were on the field positions they were put in the first half, and the circumstances that they had to overcome, granted, there were a few drop turnovers, but defense is holding tight. I mean, they're doing what they can do. We still don't have the pass rush that we're acclimated to. We're still sackless city, not Sack Lake City. We're sackless city with 0 sacks last night. I am starting to wonder, you know what? The best quote that I have heard out of all of this came from Whittingham after the game, and it was the shortest quote, and it said, big changes are coming. And that's going to be personnel, could be play calling. Big changes are coming. They've got nothing to lose and everything to gain with a whole warehouse change and approach. You've got senior and experienced players seeing as their last chance to make a statement season dwindle away. You have underclassmen fighting for a chance to get in. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of roster changes when we line up against Houston.
So something that I feel like we need to address, because last year was rough too, and we had that whole circus with Cam. Is he going to play the entire season? And that was hard to bear. But what I'm getting at here is, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this, because I do have a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Witt, but is this the end of an era? Because this is what I keep hearing. This is the rumblings amongst fans that I know. It's like, is this the end of Whittingham's tenure at the University of Utah. What do you guys think?
I'm willing to go conspiracy theory, but Mark, you go ahead.
Um, I'd like to think that he doesn't want to go out with this kind of a taste in his mouth. But yeah, at some point it starts to become a little bit of a tsunami. I mean, the fan sentiment and people starting to get pretty fed up, and the guys in the program, the players, the guys that are laying it out all the time. There's a sense that, yeah, there's a change in the atmosphere of college athletics and especially college football. You see these teams on TV that have got who knows how much money tied up in, like I watched the Indiana game yesterday, and they had 8 or 10 players that were transfers from other teams that had been all conference players at those teams. So, I mean, you're talking about a massive overhaul of that roster with a brand new coach, and they've got the magic right now. And it's that kind of that college football is becoming that kind of an environment, that kind of an landscape. So, yeah, I hate to admit it, but yeah, things are kind of lining up that way.
In terms of Whittingham stepping aside,
Yeah, I think for Utah to do something like what Indiana is shown to do, and granted, we're only halfway through a season, would require resources, and it's just a completely different recipe to get to that level of success. And, Whittingham is used to doing it, the traditional way, blocking and tackling, player development. That's been our MO for decades. Yeah, it's a little bit of a different environment. Cal last week was talking about, how Nick Saban came to his decision. And I'm starting to become more convinced that it's that sort of a situation that we're seeing.
I totally agree, Mark. I've been thinking about it for weeks. I've mentioned it a couple of times. And I could even spin the conspiracy theory even deeper. I was thinking this morning. So let's say Vaki, Ellis, and Cole meet with Whittingham last year and ponder staying for another season. He tells them, no, I'm gone. Next year is my final year. I mean, I would expect Whittingham to be honest with that. Okay. That's neither here nor there. But as the season progresses, he tells Morgan, coaching and waiting. He tells Ludwig, he tells the coaching staff, he tells Cam Rising. They know their wind is out of Utah sails right now. Something is missing that hasn't been there, or that has been there for decades. The buy-in. Okay. I'll even take it a step further. The Forever 22 bomb that got us through all that traumatic seasons. The majority of the roster never experienced that. It's hard to rally around something in the locker room that you're not a part of. It's like an out-of-stater getting up for the Holy War, for a rivalry game. You don't really know until you're there and involved. And I'm not saying Forever 22 is a bad thing in any way, shape, or form, but it's hard to get people to get motivated for your saying. There's a reason why you build the culture from within and you address the adversity that faces every team. We also have a team that's full of entitlement. How many players have we been waiting to come back, assuming that they would be superstar status once they return to the field? And it's been over the last couple of seasons. We've had kids out for an entire year with the expectation whoever plays that position is just second in waiting. I mean, you look at the tight end position, you look at quarterback, you look at other positions on defense that you have players that are waiting to make their bid and get their shot, but the whole media focus and the talk in the locker room is wait till so-and-so comes back. How long are they gone? It's hard to rally around that. Plus, on top of the new face of college football being free agency, like you just mentioned at Indiana. Indiana's coach had the perfect quote yesterday. He said, I win, Google me. And that's the truth. He has been a winner. So people are going to be attracted to that. The only thing we really had to attract other singers and other athletes is the possibility of making a run with our team captain. Now we have a new team captain now that Cam's gone. Isaac Wilson gets nominated team captain the first week possible. And I have a hard time believing that it's easy for that offensive line to rally around this young freshman kid when they have been waiting for Cam for so long.
Oh, absolutely.
Has been waiting for Cam for so long. And it's a kick in the teeth. And then maybe those trickles, like I started to mention, of Whittingham stepping down start to get prominent in the locker room. It's easy to keep tight lips in a locker room if you're devoted to the season. They've kept their injury reports secret from the fans and the press. It's not hard for them to know and harbor these secrets. But if Whittingham is saying, yeah, this is it, I'm turning over more responsibilities to Scally, to the offensive coordinator, so that they get a feel of what it's like when my voice isn't on the headset. I mean, all of this combined could be the lack of wind in our sails because we are stalled in the middle of dead water. The only life preserver we have right now is our defense. And it's not any one position's fault. It's not any player's fault. But it seems like there is a massive disconnect between what's being talked in the coaches' meetings to what's happening in practice to what's being executed on the field. So I would not doubt one bit that Whittingham at the end says, you know what, peace him out. And it wouldn't be because of a losing season. It would be because of the landscape changing. He doesn't want to have to worry about what free agents he can get in next year. He probably doesn't want to worry about if I don't play X enough games, they could be gone. Like this is becoming a huge thing. One more quick point, and I hate to ramble, but I do that frequently. Utah, when I was there, traditionally made the step with McBride at the helm. Football scholarships are annual. Not a lot of people realize that you sign an annual contract, and it was the MO of big-time SEC schools, Alabama, whomever you want to use an example. Their graduation rates are not important or were not as important. Utah took a different approach. You were there for 4 years. If you signed, nobody was going to take your scholarship if you weren't cracking the starting lineup. You weren't going to just lose it. That was commitment to the players. I'm wondering if that needs to be regressed or if it's no longer the case because you don't know if you offer somebody an educational opportunity, if they're even going to want it or stay for it. Because it doesn't seem like the academics is the driving force behind the keynote players that we see on ESPN week in and week out. It's come down to the NIL. And unfortunately, that is changing the landscape, and it makes it hard as a fan and a true Ute to root for somebody who's not making their money versus somebody who's sticking it out because of the educational opportunity. That landscape is what I'm talking about, is about being changes. There are things that I'm not privy to. Us as a fan base, the media, we will not be privy to it until Whittingham writes his book and releases it 15 years from now.
Great. Great thoughts. Couldn't agree more. Mark, do you have anything else you want to add before we end this segment?
Yeah, I think, I have to agree with Cal on the fact that Witt's on the sideline without headset. He's definitely starting to turn it over. He mentioned some things before the season. At some point he's gonna hang him up. I remember early in the Whittingham years, people used to ask him, how long do you foresee coaching? I mean, one of your mentors as a coach was Lavelle Edwards at BYU, and Whittingham just kind of waved that off and said, no, it's 1 year at a time. That's the only way you can think about doing a job like that, right? You can't think about the entirety, but we're at the 20-year mark, which is absolutely amazing and extremely rare in today's game. I don't think he has anything to explain or justify to anyone based on his record, but at the same time, the game has changed, as Cal really well explained it.
Yeah, great thoughts. And Whittingham is the greatest coach to ever coach at the University of Utah, and we're indebted to him for what he's done. Be very interesting, and something we can talk about in the next segment is what the future looks like for Utah and what we expect from Morgan Scally. But we'll be right back after a few messages from our sponsor.
advantages from the sponsor.
The Ken Garff University Club in Rice Eccles Stadium is Utah's premier social club. Members enjoy incredible dining experiences, co-working spaces, exclusive member events, and fun game experiences like tailgating, pep rallies, and watch parties. Membership starts as low as $80 a month and is actively accepting new memberships. To learn more about joining this beautiful club, go to kengarfuniversityclub.com to learn more.
Welcome back to the show, Ute fans. I'm Andy Brown, your host, and I'm joined by superfan Mark Oberg and former Ute return man, cornerback, Utah legend, Beck. Great first segment, guys. Obviously, just to recap, disappointing loss against TCU. All I have to say at this point is beat BYU. Beat BYU. The season is salvageable if we can beat them, because I don't want to hear about that SHIT for the next year. We've heard a lot of crap from BYU fans since the last loss in Provo, the last time we played them. So Cal seems to think that we have a chance to beat BYU.
I like the way things are lining up. We go to Houston this week. Houston seems to be trying to find their identity as well. It's a chance for us to get some momentum moving forward. Then we've got a bye week. And then we host the Cougars. So if there was any week that I would like to have that bye week, it's the one prior to playing them, especially with where their record stands right now. Oklahoma State gave them a run for their money. There's a lot of crazy stuff. Iowa State's looking great in the conference. There's still some surprises are going to happen in the Big 12, but I like this 3-week layout in the schedule that we've got coming up.
I don't trust your optimism. I mean, I know that BYU had a close call there against Oklahoma State. We were discussing that during the break, that it came down to the defensive scheme there by Okie State at the end and some missed tackles, and would have been a much different game. So I just to touch on BYU briefly, I do think, they've played well, but it's very possible that they're not as good as they think they are. They've had luck go their way. So
there's been a lot of teams that have discovered they're not as good as they think they are. I mean, I love Maryland winning against SC last night. It's absolutely phenomenal. There's so many exciting things going on with football in general in the national landscape. The bracket for the college football championship changes every week. Texas got exposed yesterday. There's still a lot of surprises left in this game, and that's why we play it. Anybody can win any given Saturday.
What? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say the old adage about, you're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are, and it comes down to a handful of plays. That's still true, and that's what we're seeing in some of those games. I mean, I checked in a little bit on the BYU Oklahoma State game, and I was kind of surprised that Oklahoma State was in the game because they'd struggled, quite a bit. But in any given game, it's going to be close. And so, when it comes down to Utah against BYU, I think, all bets are off. You just have to see what happens.
I see. I'm an old head that it's hard not to get up for that game, but I come from a different decade. They haven't played in a very, very long time over the last decade. Like, there's not that many matchups that we've had, and we've come up short on the last one. So I want to believe as an old Ute that that's the game that turns everything around.
Well, I made a bet with a coworker who is a BYU fan, and if BYU wins, I have to wear royal blue to work the following Monday. I know I'm an idiot. I shouldn't have taken that bet.
Super easy. Just wear your Dodger gear. Super easy.
No, it has to have a big fat Y on the front of it, I'm afraid. So I know you guys are disappointed in me because I'm probably going to have to buy a shirt with a big Y on it, but we'll see.
You can turn it into oil rags or house cleaning stuff right afterwards. So don't spend a lot of money on it.
So it's something to clean my bathroom with, So, yeah, interesting season. You fans, me included, bought into the hype going into the season, and if history has shown me anything, that's usually a mistake. So it is we look bad. That's my opinion. I'm not as astute as you guys are when it comes to football, but based on what I've seen, we just don't look very good. And we talked about in the last segment, our offense has no identity. Is this season salvageable? I mean, outside of the BYU game, because we do have to play Iowa State at home as well, and that's going to be a tough game. And we have to go to UCF for the last game of the season. Colorado's not going to be a cakewalk.
All big opportunities. And like I mentioned earlier in the segment, or in the other segment, I think we see some roster changes. The kids are going to get their shot. We're going to start seeing maybe a transformation of identities and trying to find an identity on offense. Some kids, and that's the nature of why we watch college sports. At least for me, it's to root for these kids that are getting their shot and to make an impact and to play a game that they love. And we're going to see that opportunity. Like you said, Iowa State's coming to us. That's a big deal. That's a big game. UCF going there. It's a lot of exciting footballs in front of us. And where it's salvageable, absolutely. The season is salvageable.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's disappointing to kind of fall down from those early expectations of, being in the playoff, possibly. All of that is kind of fallen away, but being at the game last night, we still had a good crowd. Utah fans love their team, and everything is relative. We just need to keep fighting and see if we can get that identity and see what can happen. It's one game at a time, and you have to just take it in. I mean, I've been through seasons where we were really bad, where we won 3 games. I remember a couple of seasons when I was a kid where we won 1 game, right? So to me, you just enjoy it, regardless of what happens. Savor it. You can talk about it with your family years later. Obviously, the wins are much better, obviously, but when you're not doing as well, you're still a fan. What else do we have a choice? We're Ute fans, right?
Everybody has a choice. It's just the life that they want to live. Everybody has a choice. That's people come, fans come and fans go. But like you said, one season victories. Andy, you started this episode off by talking about the Freedom Bowl. That was 30 years ago this season. If you look at the law of averages of what we've experienced as a program, as a fan base, as a former player over the last 30 years, we're doing pretty damn good. And this small window, yes, it hurts, but in the big picture of things, we've got some work to do. We're still going to get some stuff done, and it's going to be exciting youth football. That's what we're here for. And if it stings, it stings, but we are here for the long haul, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Ute fan through and through. I've got a friend actually that we're very close, but we get into it all the time because he quits on his teams. When they don't live up to his standards, which I think is such bull. I don't, I'm still going to go to the games. I'm still going to wear my gear. I'm going to cheer on my team. It's the school I went to. Love the Utes, love Coach Witt. And we've been spoiled. I mean, Cal touched on that. We've had a lot of success, more than BYU in recent years by a wide margin. So, I think that we'll right the ship. And, we did talk in the last segment about, what the program would look like with Morgan Scalley. And Cal pointed out that it's probably too soon to speculate on that, although people are already doing that, especially right now. But, I think the future is bright for Utah. And we just have some growing pains right now. So might be a rough season. Who knows? We might salvage it. Who knows? But we're Ute fans. We're not gonna quit on our guys. So do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap everything up for today's show?
The second half of the season is going to be an exciting experience for a lot of reasons. I think Stay tuned. Stay tuned. We're not done yet. Stay tuned.
Mark?
I agree. And I also just kind of circling back on that, everything is relative, and, there's ebbs and flows over the course of a long period of being a Ute fan. Long term, I think we're going to be fine. Does that mean I'm predicting, playoff experience or appearances and that kind of stuff? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, there's a season for everything, and we're going to be back. Not at the levels that some of the most euphoric fans are expecting necessarily right away. But we talked about Iowa State. I mean, they've got a good coach. They've got a good program. They had a really good year and everything was looking good. And then they've kind of stumbled and fallen off. It's hard to maintain excellence. I mean, there's a handful of programs across the country, but look at all the years that Texas has really struggled compared to where fans and resources would, the number of resources would suggest they should be. And they're having a pretty good year this year, and then yesterday they got boat raced, right? So it's all relative. It's becoming more kind of like baseball, where you win some, you lose some, and you just hope at the end of the year, it was a good experience and your team's still playing, right? So yeah, I take a long-term view, because I do remember those 1 year win seasons, and it was pretty bleak. I remember as a kid looking at those UTEP players, and I was thinking, I think we're a little bit better than UTEP. But what do you do if you're a UTEP player? Well, you better be studying, because football comes to an end and you're going to have to do something else. So that got me motivated to go back to junior high school and pay more attention. So, football's part of life, but it's not everything.
Never as bad as it seems, never as good as it gets.
Exactly.
Well, awesome show, guys. You fans, followers that we appreciate so much. Stay tuned for our podcast following the Houston game. And, oh yeah, go Utes.
Go Utes.
Go Utes.